Tonight's tip is on making sure your shocks are mounted correctly on your swing arm and in your frame. Many times what will happen is guys will pinch the swing arm or they'll tighten things too much on the frame and it'll start to bind on that shock. It won't be able to move freely. I'm going to give you a couple of tips right now to show you the proper way to do that. The first thing you're going to want to look for is to make sure that your bracket here and your mount is straight and it's nice and square. A lot of times what happens is over the years people will put the bolt in and they will pinch this together because they've used different shocks. Now, in the perfect world where things are just right, this Honda shock and this bolt would go in here very smoothly. There's only a couple of millimeters of play on each side of it, and that would be certainly acceptable when you go to put the shock in the bike. So, you're going to do that. Run your bolt in, and you want to make sure that you don't run the bolt too far in or make it too tight that you start to pinch that little clamp together. What I would recommend is that you do put a dab of Loctite on that side of your swing arm or on your bolt. This way you know it's going to be secure. It isn't always going to be perfect like that, and it's not always going to work that way, but when it is perfect, this is about the way it should look. The shock should be able to move freely on there with not too much play side to side. Another situation you may find yourself in is where a swing arm doesn't have threads on this side of the shock mount, and you want to put your bolt through there. You don't want to use a regular nut. You want to run your bolt through there, put your shock in there, and what you want to use is a nylock nut like that. This way, you can tighten down on your bolt just enough to where it's tight. It's not going to come out, but that nylock nut is going to secure or give you the security of knowing that the bolt isn't going to back out, the nut isn't going to come loose. Let's move on to something else. Now, here's another situation where you may want to use a shock like this on whatever bike you're going to be putting it on. Let's say that this happens to be your bolt that came through your swing arm and fits your swing arm. Well, it doesn't fit the shock very well. So what do you do there? You're going to need something called eyelets, and they look like this. And you should have two of them, one for each side of the shock. One's going to go on this side, one's going to go on the other side, and then when your bolt goes through there, it's going to fit properly and go into your swing arm. This one might be a little short for the application, but I just wanted to show you what you could do to remedy that when you have the correct bolt for your bike, but you don't have a bushing in there that's actually proper for the job. Now, one last scenario we might have here is, let's say you have the proper bolt for your swing arm and you want to use a shock, but there's too much play in there. What I would suggest is that you take a washer, put it in there like so, make sure you use some grease on your bushing in there, maybe a little bit on the bolt as well. Put it in through there, use your nylock nut on this side, and you'd be in good shape. You shouldn't have any more than maybe 3 or 4 millimeters of play side to side. And more importantly, don't forget, do not over tighten this and pinch this on your swing arm, pinching the shock. And the same would apply on the top of your bike as well. You'd have the same scenario on top. It looks like this on the frame, looks like this on the swing arm. You don't want to over tighten them, and you don't want to make it so that nut may come loose and cause a problem while you're riding your bike. Now, there are different types of eyelets and bushings that you can use to make the shock work on your bike. It is not so easy to press out a bushing like this. You may need an actual press to do it. I've done it in a vise. I've done it a couple of different ways, but to get those out and to change them can be difficult. So you might have to replace them, or as I said, if your bolt is too big, like on that shock we showed you a little bit earlier, just like this, you may have to use some type of eyelet like this, depending on the bolt that you have. Could be something a little bigger to make sure that the bolt that you're using fits properly. Well, that's my tip for tonight. Don't forget, tighten them, but don't over tighten them. Use a little Loctite when you have to, and make sure the bushings in the bolt are a match and everything fits together nice and smoothly, always with no more than 3 or 4 millimeters play side to side when your shock is mounted to your frame or to your swing arm.